So today we're going to talk about this. I just want to tell you a story. And in this story, so we're going to start in John 6. And eventually we're going to cover 15 through 21. But it starts out here with his disciples. And it starts with Jesus saying, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force. He was preaching in front of a huge crowd. And he perceived they were going to take him by force to make him king. Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. Now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. So they went down, got in the boat, and left. Jesus still up on the mountain. And they got in the boat and they left. Now, if all you did was read John's account of this, that would be weird. Okay? I mean, these guys go everywhere with Jesus, right? And he's up on the mountain, and they just split. That's why it's important to fully read and understand, search things. But let's go on. Verse 18, the sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. So I want to switch now to the same story, but over in Matthew. Because each one of the gospel writers, they kind of have their own thing. All of our writers of the Bible write from their perspective, but under the influence of the Holy Spirit. So what we get is what we're supposed to get, but the flavor of it comes through the writer. He's still involved. Now Matthew, when he wrote, he was a tax collector. He was a detailed fellow. He was a government worker. He was into the details. And man, he spent most of that first chapter of his talking about the details, his lineage, exciting stuff that made Jesus the heir to the throne of David. You know that whole begat part? Yeah. Now that's a great study, by the way, but yeah, there's a lot there, and he put it in detail, and there's no way you come away from that and don't know Jesus is an heir to the throne of David, because the details are there. Well, John is a passionate fisherman. One of the sons of thunder, okay? I mean, this dude could get fired up. And just a simple guy, but passionate about what he did. And so, in his first chapter, you know what he says? He didn't even get throne of David? No, not even concerned. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. And then a little bit down from that, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. A little bit down, what do we get? And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Ooh. Beginning was the Word was God, and God wrapped himself in flesh and lived with us. That's how John started his book. Jesus is God. We're not even going to deal with the throne of David here. Jesus is God. That's his passion, right? And when it was time for just a couple of them to go with him, it was always Peter and James and John. Okay, they were like the inner 3 of the inner 12. So John just has a different focus. And I think his focus when he was writing in that story we just read was that he was leaving Jesus behind. I don't think he was happy about that. I mean, he went everywhere with Jesus. But let's see why they did it. So in Matthew 14, it says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. So see, he told them to go do it. They left without him, but Matthew's detail, he told them to. And the thing about that is sometimes, guys, we have to go out and get into our life and do stuff, and we might not see. There might be times we don't feel God with us. Man, we might get up one day and we're just not feeling like God is all loving on us. We might be in the middle of some problems and we can't see it, how Jesus is with us this day. But understand something. When he sent the disciples across the water, miles across the Sea of Galilee, he was still with them. They couldn't see his presence. At the moment when they're rowing and they're wandering and stuff, they can't feel his presence. But I'm telling you, they were never out of his presence. You and I are never out of the presence of God. He has promised to never leave us, to never forsake us, whatever the storm is. So sometimes we're out there and we're not feeling like he's right there with me. But like I told the kids, sometimes when I look down, I remember that he is. Because he's promised to be. God doesn't lie. I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. I take that into heart. I believe it. So I know I don't walk alone. And you know what? Did you know feelings can actually lie to you? Do you know that? Yeah, you get all wrapped up and feel something real easy. You might not be feeling the right thing. We can be deceived by our feelings. You know what you're not deceived by? The Word of God. So that's where we stick to. So anyway, moving on with the story. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. That's pretty amazing, right? Jesus just decides he doesn't need the boat. He just walks out to the boat. And they're in the middle of winds and storm, and they see somebody walking on the water. I totally understand that they were flipped out by this, okay? Right now, today, having read this story, if I'm out there fishing and there's a storm and I see somebody walking across the water to me, it's going to flip me out, okay? I'm all full of belief that that's going to weird me out for a little bit. So their thought was, it's a ghost. Now, if you understand the Jews of the time, first off, they didn't like the water. Even the fishermen, they didn't like getting out there very deep. Because you don't know what's under the water. It messes with them. They just don't like it. Phoenicians, they did not care. They go anywhere. Jews really like to be able to see the shore. And so then you see something weird out there where you're already a little excited. It's a ghost. They were terrified. They cried out in fear. Grown men, okay? Tough men. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it's I, don't be afraid." And Peter answered him. I love Peter. Guys, come on. Man, he was never at a loss for jumping out and saying something. Even if it was wrong, he would jump out and say it. I appreciate that. Peter answered, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come out to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. Now we know the rest of the story. I'm getting there. But I want you to see something. Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water, walking to Jesus. Okay? Yeah, what happens next happens. But never, ever discount the fact that this brother walked on the water. It wasn't just one guy that walked on the water that night. There were two. And one of them wasn't God. One of them was just a guy. He asked Jesus, and Jesus said, "Do it," and he did it. That's something we got to take to heart. That we can do whatever God calls us to do. Although you got to get out of the boat to do it. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you're the Son of God." Man, they had seen stuff before this. But now they're like, my goodness, yeah, you're the Son of God. Something else happened, and then Matthew doesn't record, but John does. We're going to jump back over there. But I want you to see this. We can do whatever we are called to do by God. In his power, in his strength, and in his time. But we got to keep our eyes on him. I'm telling you, when you look at that problem, when you look at the job that didn't come through, or you look at the promotion you didn't get, or when you're looking at the news you got from the doctor that just stinks, and you're looking at all those things instead of looking at Jesus, you're going to sink. You're going to fall. Man, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be tied up. It's going to just eat at you. But when you as a child of God stand up to all that news with your eyes clearly focused on God, knowing whatever the end of the road is, that end of the road leads to Jesus. We can meet it. I have watched saints leave this church and go on to be with Jesus and meet that trip with bravery, with courage, with honor, because they knew where they were going and they knew who was holding them. And guys, that's a lot to be able to hang on to. When the world out there doesn't have anything to hold on to, we have Jesus. Yeah, we got to get out of the boat sometimes, but keep your eye on him. John's going to finish our story out here, verses 20 and 21 of chapter 6. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Remember, they're all terrified. Then they were glad to take him into the boat. And look at this. Immediately, the boat was at the land to which they were going. You know, there's one time they're out there in the middle of the water, and Jesus did it to them a couple times, right? So they're out there with him, and he's sound asleep, the storm's raging and everything, and they all thought they're going to die, and Jesus has got up and calmed the storm. That's cool. They should have known then who they were dealing with. But this time they got in the storm, they didn't have him on board. But they were okay because they were his. You know, even, it didn't happen, but even if they went down with their boat and went down serving God, that's a good way to go down. You know, none of us are going to get out of here alive if the Lord tarries. It's going to happen to all of us eventually. It's just a matter of what and when. But how we live here until that happens, that defines us. And that shows our faith to our friends, to our family, to our world. But look at this. This time he didn't calm the storm. He stepped in the boat and they were on land. Bam. I don't even know what that would have felt like. The Sea of Galilee is like miles across, okay? They're in the middle after getting out there for 2 or 3 miles of rowing. And then, bam, you're on the shore. I don't know if that was like really fast and parted their hair or what it was. But man, that's amazing. Walking on the water is amazing. Calming a storm is amazing. But think about this, guys. Right in the middle of your stuff, the toughest thing that you have, the worst moments of your life, they can change in an instant. They can change overnight. So many people get desperate and helpless, thinking every day is going to be like the last one, and I don't want to live that one again. Tomorrow can be different. Tomorrow can be better. All we need to do is trust God. Jesus will get us through it. Take us to shore. However that trip's going to look, he'll get us there. I just want you to bow your heads here just for a moment.